Camilla had spent months believing one of the monarchy's most influential ceremonial roles was finally within her reach. Then came the announcement she never expected. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had been formally designated to inherit the position instead. Inside the royal household, the decision landed like a thunderclap. Catherine remained controlled. Charles went quiet. But for Camilla, the meaning was painfully clear. The role she had demanded had passed directly to the woman representing the monarchy's future. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had formally confirmed the decision, and there was no softer wording capable of hiding its significance. Catherine would inherit the position of royal patron and guardian of the crown's family trusts. The role was a ceremonial responsibility overseeing historic royal charities, family commemorations, and symbolic traditions connected to the sovereign. It carried no constitutional authority, but its influence came from status, access, and the ability to shape how continuity passed from one generation to another. Camilla understood that immediately. She had viewed the position as proof that her long, difficult journey into the monarchy's inner circle was finally complete. Camilla did not move when an aide placed the finalized briefing folder before her. She read the first page once, then again, until Catherine's name seemed impossible to misunderstand. Halfway through the document, the Queen Consort slowly removed her glasses and placed them beside the folder. "When was this decided?" she asked. The aide answered carefully, but the explanation barely mattered. What devastated her was not simply losing another engagement. The decision was finished. There was nothing left to negotiate. Catherine reacted very differently when her confirmation arrived. She felt no sudden triumph, only an uncomfortable weight settling over what the appointment meant for the family. William saw her hesitation before she said anything. The prince reminded her that refusing now would not heal the problem. It would merely create another crisis and make Charles appear uncertain about a decision already approved. She understood him, yet the future queen also understood exactly whose disappointment would follow. Camilla felt an older memory rise beneath the shock. Months earlier, Charles had spoken with her privately, in words she believed pointed unmistakably toward this role becoming hers. The monarch had never handed her a formal promise, but his reassurance had been strong enough for her to believe palace planning was moving in that direction. Now the briefing repeatedly used the phrase, generational continuity, meaning responsibilities designed to pass smoothly toward the next royal generation. She read those words as a message about William and Catherine, and about a future increasingly moving beyond her. Camilla closed the folder. She did not ask to see Catherine. Instead, she requested Charles. When the aide quietly told her that the king was already waiting in another room, her expression hardened. She rose, left the document behind, and walked toward the man whose earlier words had allowed her to believe this moment would end very differently. Because before she could challenge the woman who inherited the role, she needed an answer from the man she believed had once promised it to her. This was never simply about a title on palace stationery. To Camilla, the appointment represented acceptance after decades of controversy, scrutiny, and waiting. To Catherine, it represented something almost opposite, responsibility she had never openly demanded but could no longer escape. And trapped between those two interpretations stood Charles and William, two future paths of the monarchy colliding inside one family. What happened next would expose why the same royal role meant completely different things to everyone involved. Camilla carried the weight of years into her meeting with Charles. She had stood beside him through difficult engagements, public criticism, and moments when every gesture seemed judged before it was understood. The Queen Consort had come to see the royal patron and guardian position as the final confirmation that her service had earned permanent trust. It was a ceremonial office, meaning a symbolic royal responsibility rather than a constitutional power. But its emotional value to her was enormous. Losing it felt like losing recognition. Camilla sat opposite Charles and spoke without raising her voice. Being denied the role would have hurt, she told him. But watching Catherine receive it felt different. The choice seemed to compare them directly. The king understood immediately what she meant. He admitted that he had known the appointment would be read as a generational decision, and he had accepted that consequence because the monarchy needed responsibilities to move clearly toward the next reign. He had not stumbled into the symbolism, he had chosen it. Catherine felt trapped by the same decision from the opposite side. She told William that accepting something another woman deeply wanted made victory feel strangely heavy. The princess had spent years preparing for larger duties beside him, building trust through consistency, family visibility, and controlled public conduct. Yet she did not want the appointment to become a trophy. William listened carefully before reminding her that responsibility could not always be separated from disappointment. The prince told her that refusing now would not erase Camilla's pain, it would only create uncertainty around Charles. Camilla then learned something that cut even deeper. William had been consulted before the decision was finalized. He had not demanded the role for Catherine, but when Charles asked whether she was ready, the future king answered yes. To the queen consort, that mattered. It meant the next generation had not simply benefited from the decision, it had participated in confirming it. Camilla rose slowly as the conversation ended, but before leaving, she turned back to Charles. She reminded him of a private exchange at Windsor months earlier, when his words had convinced her the position would eventually become hers. The king did not deny that conversation. He only went quiet. And when palace records were quietly revisited, one particular evening emerged as the moment when Camilla's expected inheritance began slipping away. Months before Catherine's appointment became public inside the royal household, one private dinner at Windsor had already altered the course of the decision. At the time, nobody called it a turning point. There were no raised voices, no dramatic announcement, and no visible rupture. Yet one conversation around that table exposed a difference in how Camilla and Catherine viewed royal responsibility. Later, Charles would return to that evening again and again, and understand that the succession of the role had effectively been decided there. Charles had entered that dinner believing the matter was still open. Palace planners were reviewing whether the ceremonial responsibilities should remain closely tied to the reigning consort or become a longer-term duty connected to the next generation. A royal patronage meant an official relationship in which a senior royal supported a charity, cause, or institution through public attention and engagement. Camilla believed seniority placed her first in line. She already stood beside the king at major duties, and the queen consort saw the role as a natural extension of the place she had spent years building. Charles changed the tone with one question. After discussion turned toward reorganizing historic family charities, he asked how those responsibilities should survive from one reign into the next. Camilla answered first. She argued that control should remain centered around the sovereign's household because authority was clearest when responsibility stayed close to the monarch. Catherine listened, then quietly offered another idea. Some duties should move earlier, she said, so the next generation was fully prepared before succession arrived. The princess was not campaigning for herself, but the sentence landed harder than she knew. Charles said little, yet Camilla noticed everything. Later that evening, the king repeated Catherine's phrase about preparing before the moment arrives. The queen consort immediately became guarded. What had sounded like an abstract conversation suddenly felt like a test she had not known she was taking. He was no longer asking only how charities should be managed. He was thinking about who should carry them into the future. Catherine remained unaware of the damage. She later told William that she had simply answered a practical question. The prince warned her that practical answers inside royal life could carry enormous weight because every suggestion touched succession, responsibility, and public continuity. She dismissed the concern at first, but he did not. The future king sensed that Charles had heard more in her answer than she intended. Charles acted within days. He requested a private planning paper examining whether the role could become a bridge between reigns, meaning a responsibility deliberately designed to continue from the present monarchy into the next. Catherine was never told her suggestion had prompted that review. Camilla, meanwhile, continued believing the earlier reassurance she had received from the monarch still stood. That was the cruel contradiction. Before Windsor, His words had genuinely encouraged her. After Windsor, his thinking had quietly changed. Camilla learned the truth only after Catherine's appointment. Once she understood that the dinner had influenced Charles, hurt hardened into something sharper. The princess was no longer simply the woman who had received the role. In Camilla's mind, she had become the person whose single answer had redirected it. That realization turned hurt into confrontation, and before the day was over, Camilla and Catherine would finally stand face to face. There were no cameras, no courtiers standing between them, and no ceremonial smiles to soften what followed. When Camilla finally entered the room where Catherine was waiting, both women knew exactly why they were there. One had received the appointment, the other believed she had spent years earning it. Catherine tried to begin carefully, Camilla did not. Within moments, an argument buried beneath months of polite royal discipline finally broke through, and neither woman would leave unchanged. Catherine had requested the meeting because she could feel resentment beginning to travel through the family in whispers. She did not want private secretaries carrying messages between them, and she did not want William speaking on her behalf. A private secretary was a senior aide who managed a royal's official work and communications, but this conversation needed no institutional shield. The prince supported her decision and stayed away, leaving her to face Camilla alone. Camilla arrived already wounded. She believed discussions had taken place around her, while she had been allowed to continue thinking the role might still become hers. The queen consort's anger was therefore larger than Catherine. It was aimed at a process that had protected everyone except the person most emotionally invested in the outcome. When the princess began by saying she had never asked Charles for the position, Camilla pushed her chair back slightly. "You didn't have to ask," she said. The sentence landed with more force than shouting could have. Catherine refused to retreat into apology. She acknowledged the pain, but she would not describe the appointment as something improper, simply because Camilla wanted it. The princess said that if the king believed she should carry the responsibility, then she would carry it. Her calm made the confrontation harder, not easier. The queen consort could fight an accusation. She could fight ambition. What she could not easily fight was someone who refused to turn the moment into a personal victory. Camilla changed direction and asked whether William had pushed for Catherine privately. The princess answered clearly. Her husband had been consulted only after Charles had already narrowed the choice. The prince had confirmed that she was ready, but he had not demanded the role. Then Catherine admitted something else. She had briefly considered refusing it. That confession did not comfort Camilla. It cut deeper. The position she had wanted as proof of acceptance was something the other woman had nearly turned away. Camilla's voice finally dropped. She admitted that she had believed the appointment would mean she was no longer merely tolerated by royal history, but permanently recognized within it. Catherine heard the pain beneath the anger then. The princess understood that this was not only about status, it was about belonging. Catherine answered quietly that only one person could explain why the final choice had been made. Camilla already knew who she meant. The confrontation between the two women had exposed the wound, but the power behind that wound still sat with Charles. Charles had avoided framing the decision as a choice between two women. Now that was impossible. Camilla wanted an explanation, Catherine wanted clarity, and William wanted assurance that the appointment had not become collateral damage in a family dispute. The king therefore did something unusual. He explained the reasoning in unmistakably personal terms. What he said did not humiliate Camilla. It did something more painful. It confirmed that the monarchy's long-term strategy had moved beyond the present reign. Charles sat alone with Camilla and opened the briefing paper between them. It was the formal document setting out how the appointment would work, who would hold it, and how its duties would pass forward. The monarch read several lines, stopped, and closed it before reaching the end. He admitted that palace advisors had proposed different structures and that William had been asked for his judgment, but the final choice had been his. That mattered because there was no committee for Camilla to blame and no hidden official she could accuse of taking the role away. Camilla asked the question she had been holding back. Had Charles decided she was not good enough? The queen consort's voice stayed controlled, but the hurt underneath it was unmistakable. He answered, no. The role itself had changed. It was no longer meant simply as recognition for loyal service during one reign. The king had redesigned it as a bridge between the current sovereign and the next, meaning Catherine could begin carrying the responsibility now and continue holding it when William eventually became king. Camilla pressed harder. Years beside Charles had demanded patience, discipline, and loyalty under public pressure. Why, she asked, had none of that been enough? The monarch did not dismiss what she had given him. Instead, he drew the distinction that hurt most. Serving the present reign and preparing the next were different responsibilities. He needed Catherine's position for continuity, while Camilla's place remained tied to the work they were doing together now. Charles then accepted something he could no longer avoid. His earlier reassurances had allowed the queen consort to believe the appointment would become hers. He should have corrected that expectation when his thinking changed after Windsor. The king refused to blame Catherine, William, or advisors for his silence. He had created the misunderstanding, and he said so. Camilla absorbed the final detail in silence. Catherine would keep the appointment after William became sovereign. The prince had never demanded that outcome or threatened Charles into accepting it. He had simply answered that his wife was ready when asked. That left the queen consort facing the truth she had resisted. Her husband had made the decision himself. Charles had barely finished explaining before the consequences began. Staff assignments, patronage briefings, and ceremonial schedules started shifting toward Catherine's office. What had been a painful private argument was becoming an administrative reality. And once the paperwork began moving, Camilla could no longer treat Catherine's appointment as a decision that might still be reversed. The true impact did not arrive through another argument. It arrived through a calendar. One engagement that Camilla expected to lead was quietly transferred to Catherine under the responsibilities of the new role. Suddenly, the palace decision had a date, a location, and a name attached to it. For Camilla, that single alteration made everything painfully concrete. Catherine was no longer simply the woman selected for a future duty. She had already begun performing it, and the old order was disappearing in real time. Camilla felt the change before anyone called it replacement. Catherine's office received oversight of the first commemorative event connected to the royal family trusts, charitable and family duties now tied to her inherited position. Briefing papers that once moved through the queen consort's household were redirected toward the princess. Courtiers called the process implementation, meaning the practical transfer of responsibilities after a royal decision. But nobody misunderstood what was happening. The structure was shifting. Camilla noticed the revised schedule during briefing. Her finger moved down the page until it stopped beside Catherine's name in the lead position for the upcoming ceremony. The queen consort said nothing. She handed the paper back. The silence unsettled the room more than anger would have, because everyone understood that one printed line had turned an abstract decision into loss. Catherine felt no triumph when her aides began preparing her. She insisted that Camilla's earlier work with the associated causes be included in every briefing and acknowledgement. The princess would accept the responsibility, but she refused to behave as though the woman before her had contributed nothing. William found her rereading the documents before the first planning session. The prince listened as she admitted that every successful step seemed capable of deepening Camilla's humiliation. He answered that she could not lead by being permanently afraid of someone else's disappointment. Camilla then received another proposal. A senior courtier told her that Charles wanted her to focus on causes connected to her own years of public service. At first, she heard only consolation. The queen consort thought she was being handed a smaller lane because Catherine had taken the larger road. But another possibility emerged. Losing the inherited role did not erase her influence beside the king. It separated her personal legacy from the dynastic continuity designed to carry forward into William's reign. Camilla sat with that distinction longer than expected. Then she made a decision that surprised Catherine. She requested a private meeting, without Charles, without William, and without advisors. Their first meeting had been about possession of the role. Their second would become a far more difficult conversation about what each woman believed she was leaving behind. The second conversation began differently from the first. There were no folders on the table, no briefing notes, and no question about whether the appointment could change. Both knew the answer. Catherine would keep the role. Camilla would not receive it. With the contest finally removed, something unexpected became possible. Honesty without negotiation. What followed was not a sudden friendship or a dramatic apology. It was more meaningful than that. A recognition that both women had been fighting different fears under the same royal roof. Camilla had requested one condition before entering: no private secretaries, no family members, no one to soften the words said. A private secretary was an aide managing a royal's official work and communications, but this meeting would have no institutional buffer. Catherine agreed. Charles had already signed the arrangement. Implementation was underway, and neither woman entered expecting the decision to move backward. Camilla spoke first, and this time anger fell away. She admitted that losing the position had frightened her because Catherine's place seemed built to survive into another reign, while her own life beside Charles felt tied to the present one. The Queen Consort saw the role as proof that history would remember her as more than a temporary figure beside the king. Without it, she feared permanence belonged to someone else. Catherine answered with a fear Camilla had never considered. Every new responsibility reminded her that William would one day become sovereign, and that future carried pressure, duty, and unavoidable loss before it ever brought authority. The princess told her that what looked like permanence often felt like a burden moving steadily closer. She was not collecting victories. She was preparing for a life she could not escape. Catherine then pushed the ceremonial briefing across the table and asked what Camilla would change. The gesture was not surrender. It was recognition that experience did not become worthless simply because responsibility had moved forward. The Queen Consort read, then pointed to traditions that should remain untouched and names that should still be acknowledged. For the first time, she spoke not as someone demanding the role back, but as someone handing knowledge onward. Catherine listened and said, inheritance did not have to mean erasure. Camilla stayed silent for several seconds. Then she stood, looked back at the princess, and answered, then make sure it doesn't. The contest had changed in a way neither woman had expected before. Soon the public would see Catherine carry the role for the first time, and private understanding would face a far harsher test. What had changed quietly behind closed doors would now be tested in public, where one photograph could define the entire story. By the next morning, the palace drama no longer belonged only to 4 people behind closed doors. Catherine's first appearance under the inherited role placed the decision before the public, and every gesture suddenly carried meaning. Commentators searched for rivalry. Photographers waited for distance between the 2 women. Instead, one precise moment outside Buckingham Palace transformed the narrative. Camilla could have remained inside. She did not. What happened on those steps became the image through which the country understood the transfer of royal responsibility. Catherine arrived knowing this was more than another engagement. She was leading a commemorative reception connected to the royal family trusts, the group of historic charitable and family responsibilities now attached to her new ceremonial position. Broadcasters immediately framed the event as evidence that duties were moving toward William and his wife, while Charles still remained sovereign. The princess understood the danger. One wrong gesture could make preparation for the future look like a public rejection of Camilla. Camilla had every reason to stay away. Her absence would not have broken protocol, meaning the accepted rules governing formal royal appearances and duties, and few could have criticized her openly. Yet several minutes after Catherine arrived, the Queen Consort appeared beside her. The small crowd gathered outside Buckingham Palace reacted immediately. Applause rose louder, not because the tension had vanished, but because the 2 women standing together suggested that private disappointment would not become public warfare. Catherine then made the private promise visible. During her remarks, she credited Camilla's earlier work with the causes linked to the role, and described that foundation as something worth protecting. The princess did not surrender authority or soften Charles's decision. She simply refused to inherit by pretending nothing had existed before her. The queen consort heard the acknowledgement and understood the message. Catherine had remembered their conversation about inheritance without erasure. Charles watched the moment closely from inside, with William beside him. The king had feared that the appointment might split the household into competing camps. Instead, he saw Catherine lead without humiliating Camilla, and watched the older woman remain present without challenging the transfer. The prince quietly told his father that his wife had handled the moment exactly as required. For once, the silence that followed carried relief rather than tension. By the following morning, a fictional national newspaper captured the moment across its front page. Catherine's arrival filled the photograph beneath the headline, "The Future Steps Forward." Yet the deeper image was Camilla appearing beside her, turning a story of rivalry into one of reluctant continuity. Camilla returned to her rooms after the reception, and found the old draft paperwork naming her as the expected holder of the role. She stared at it longer than she intended. The public ceremony had settled the palace question, but her real verdict would come alone, with the document that represented everything she had believed was going to be hers. The final moment did not happen before cameras or during another royal confrontation. It happened quietly, after the applause had faded. Camilla sat with the earlier draft that once seemed to promise her the role Catherine now held. She could preserve it as proof of what had been denied to her. She could continue treating the appointment as a judgment on everything she had built. Instead, the queen consort made one small decision that finally revealed what the entire conflict had truly meant. Camilla opened the preliminary planning document created before the Windsor dinner and found her own name beside the position. The paper confirmed why she had believed the appointment was moving toward her. A preliminary planning document was an early working proposal, not a final royal decision, but months earlier that distinction had felt almost meaningless. Now it mattered completely. Catherine would carry the royal patron and guardian responsibilities into William's future reign, while the queen consort would continue her own causes beside Charles during his. Camilla read the page once more, then closed the folder. She did not keep it nearby, as evidence of a promise broken. Instead, she asked that it be returned to the normal royal archive, the official collection where palace records are preserved, rather than personally held. The gesture was quiet, but final. She was no longer protecting the abandoned version of her future. Charles spoke with her later, and did not hide behind palace procedure. The king admitted that he should have been clearer when his thinking changed after Windsor. Camilla answered with equal calm. What had hurt most, she said, was not simply seeing Catherine chosen. It was discovering that she had mistaken expectation for certainty. The monarch accepted that truth, and for the first time since the announcement, neither of them needed someone else to blame. Catherine refused to treat acceptance as victory. She sent Camilla a handwritten note thanking her for the guidance she had offered before the first engagement. The princess did not pretend the conflict had never happened. The queen consort did not pretend the loss no longer mattered. They simply accepted a new boundary. Catherine held the role, but experience had not been erased. William understood what the appointment now represented. The prince saw his wife moving from preparation into active responsibility, proof that their eventual reign was no longer a distant idea. Charles had chosen continuity over consolation, not because one woman mattered and the other did not, but because royal duties eventually moved toward the generation expected to carry them longest. Camilla had demanded the role because she believed it would prove she belonged. Catherine inherited it because the crown believed she would need to carry it into the future. In the end, that difference explained everything, and when Camilla finally stopped fighting the transfer, the monarchy moved forward with its present intact, its future defined, and the battle decisively over. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.